people are going out there, have it in their head to go cover crops this year, they really need to talk to their merchant, make out their plan, then talk to their merchant and get the seeds as quickly as they possibly can. Because what I'm hearing at the moment on the ground is that a lot of the seed has already gone out from the seed producers. They're on merchants' yards at the moment, and they're being delivered out to farms as we speak.
Hello, I'm Kieran Lynch, and welcome to OviCast, the Teagasc Sheep podcast. Each episode will bring you latest insights, advice, and technical updates for the sheep industry. In this episode, Teagasc Tillage specialist Shay Phelan joins us to discuss how and why catch crops are being used, the impact the sowing date can have on yield, and the practicalities of sowing them effectively. Shay takes us through the various regulations that need to be adhered to and what farmers should keep in mind when planning rotations. We hear first from Shay, who discusses the role of catch crops on tillage farms.
I suppose if we look from our environmental hat straight off the bat, I suppose cover crops or catch crops, they're a very good method of soaking up any residual nutrition that's left behind after whatever crop has been grown. In this case, it's normally cereal crops. So from that point of view, they're a very good way of trapping excess nitrogen and preventing that from leaching into groundwater. The other thing, I suppose, that they are quite good at, but over I suppose a longer period of time, is soil conditioning. So over time, if you're continually using cover crops, you will incrementally build soil organic matter. You will improve soil health, soil the activity in the soil. So from that point of view, they're good for soils as well. And I suppose the final part of the reason why most tillage farmers grow them now at this stage is that where they have access to animals, they are a relatively cheap source of fodder over the winter. So from that point of view, they tick a lot of boxes for tillage farmers.
It's an extra crop essentially overlooked. There are them other benefits you mentioned. For those considering a Shay, what are the different options that they can put in?
Yeah, so look, I suppose it depends on what they want to do, Kieran. If you're looking for, and I suppose probably the most common type of mix out there is something that's cheap, but it can be utilizable. And by utilizable, I mean it's for grazing livestock. So from that point of view, probably the brassicas are by far and away probably the most popular cover crop mix out there. So you're looking at fodder kale, fodder rape, leafy turnip, those type of crops are probably the most common, especially down this way where you might have sheep coming off the mountains or something like that, the Wicklow Mountains, and they'll graze the crop for you. So that's probably the most common one, if you like. But there are other mixes out there, and certainly I think a lot of the companies, particularly likes of Diageo and Guinness, are supporting growers to grow them. And generally speaking, those ones tend to be more focused on soils and soil building and trapping nutrients. So you're looking at maybe things like fodder or tillage radish, oil radish, maybe some of the clovers where you're trying to build fertility in the soil, or some of the legumes like peas and beans. And then you have something quite similar, like what we call the kind of grasses and cereals. You have the likes of rye, oats and things like that. And I suppose the final grouping that you have then are the likes of phacelia, buckwheat, linseed and sunflowers, those type of exotic sort of crops that guys put in. So I suppose it's a mix and match of all of those. Where you're looking for, some of the soil mixing ones or the soil improvement ones, you're probably looking at the likes of phacelia, buckwheat, those type of seeds going into the mix in some way. Some mixes are quite simple. They're maybe two-way mixes, so you could have, like say a fodder rape and a tillage radish or something like that. And then there are some other ones which are your 5, 6, 7-way mixes where you have bits and pieces of everything in there. So it depends really on what people want to do and how much money they want to spend.
Okay. So there is quite a variety there, and look, each of them have a different role. I suppose from the livestock perspective, it is the brassic, it's your leafy turnip. They're the main ones that we're going to see going in. On that basis, Shay, like, what impact can sowing date have on the potential yield of those? And we might even talk a little bit about, how you get them into the ground and the impact prep could have as well on it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the key point to it is, any of these crops that you can get into the ground, the earlier you can get them in to trap as much heat and sunlight as we can as the summer goes on. Once you get into September, your day length is getting shorter, so you don't tend to get as much growth. But certainly this year, where harvest is going to be early, I'm talking to guys around in Carlow here at the moment, and talking to guys around here. Spring barley is going to be harvested probably over the next week or so. So there's a great opportunity straight away to get back in before the end of July or maybe even to early August and get some of these crops into the ground and trap all the nitrogen and get all that growth that's there in August. And generally speaking, a day in August is worth a week in September. So the earlier you can get in August, the more biomass you're going to grow, the more fodder you're going to grow for whatever livestock you're going to put in on those. So the key rule, I suppose, the earlier you can get them in, the better.
It can have a major impact, and it is quite drastic as the month progresses, how much of an impact that can have on yield.
Absolutely. And Richie Hackett would have done quite a bit of work here in Oak Park over the years, looking at growth rates, kind of in late July, early August versus the middle of September. And there's a stark difference between what biomass you will grow in August compared to what you grow in September.
And just in terms of getting that in, how much tilling are we talking about here? How basic can the application be to get those into the ground?
So yeah, it's a good point. If you're involved in any of the schemes, you're told that you can only use minimum disturbance cultivation. So you're looking non-inversion cultivation, so no ploughing or anything like that. So you're looking at probably use of something like a disc harrow with a seeder on top or something like that. There's plenty of machines out there, with the capability of putting these things. There's Einbach drills. Those type of things will work as well. And I've even seen some people putting them out with fertilizer spreaders and then just cultivating them in, which, can work pretty effectively as well. So I suppose from the key point about it is really you just want to minimum disturbance on the soil. Most of these seeds are actually quite small, so you don't want to bury them 3, 4, 5 centimeters into the ground. You want them kind of near the top of the surface. And when you have them in, then yeah, make sure and roll them afterwards just to give you better soil to seed contact, and you get better uptake or get better strike rates in those crops, and they'll go on quicker then.
Okay. I suppose the other aspect we need to look at is the nutrient requirements for these crops. If we're expecting to get a good yield, it's going to have an impact. Some might have went with farmyard manure at application. But what is the requirement for, we say, the forage brassicas or those leafy turnips?
From their point of view, I suppose it's difficult to say, because really and truly, the idea of cover crops is that they're supposed to mop up whatever nutrition is in the ground. So especially like some nitrogen. Okay, so but for P and K, again, most farmers are going to be constricted by what they can actually put on as part of the fertilizer register. So I suppose from that point of view, you really need to go back to your nutrient management plan that growers would have put out earlier in the year, and then see if there is an allowance to put any more P and K on them. But from that point of view, I suppose that's on an individual basis. But for the most part, I think most growers are growing these with just putting them onto the soil surface and growing them there from using whatever nutrition is in the soil. So from that point of view, we have to be very, very careful that we're not adding more nutrition onto the land to try and grow these crops. That kind of defeats the purpose a little bit from what these are trying to do. So I know there's possibly, there's people trying to grow as big a forage crop as they possibly can, but I think ultimately we have to look at, certainly where we are in the tillage areas, we have to be very, very careful that we're not adding to an existing problem already in terms of polluting groundwater. So from that point of view, yes, I suppose there is an argument out there that you should be putting on P and K to try to maximise the growth of these things. But in reality, I suppose what practically every farmer is doing now is just growing them with the existing fertility in the soil that's already there and trying to mop up whatever they can afterwards.
I think that's a good point. And look, it's very individual, and I suppose it really depends too on when them crops go in, the earlier they're in.
Yes.
It's definitely a different scenario. Okay, that's one aspect of it. We also have to be conscious of the various regulations for these crops, and particularly when it comes to grazing them later on. What are the couple of key things we need to be aware of when we're sowing them from a regulation point of view?
Yeah, I suppose there's a couple of things. First of all, is your buffer zone. So you need to have, be aware of your buffer zones that you need, or where there's water courses. I suppose the big one that's probably caught a lot of tillage farmers and does annoy tillage farmers is the layback rule. So from that point of view, you have to have 30% of the area in a layback So, for example, if you have a 10 hectare field, 7 hectares of it must be the crop, and 3 hectares of it must be layback. And the layback, I suppose, has to have the animals have to access to the layback at all time. And that kind of is one that kind of, does kind of annoy people a little bit in terms of, that they're trying to maximize the crop and maximize what they're trying to grow. But from that point of view, you also have to have that layback. The other one, I suppose, that does kind of get lost in a little bit around this is you have to have a 3 meter buffer around the perimeter of the parcel. So you can't sow from hedge to hedge. You have to have that 3 meter buffer all the way around the crop as well. And if there's a water feature there at somewhere along on the parcel, has to be a 4 meter buffer on that as well. And I suppose the other thing that kind of impinges on this a little bit is in the regulations is the area for ground nesting birds. So really and truly, I suppose if you have unless you're sowing 100% cover crops, you do have to have between 20 and 25% of land left idle for ground nesting birds so they can feed on whatever seeds and that are left on the soil as well. So you're either all in or you have to have that 20 to 25%. And that's on all your area, not just your cereal area. So I suppose they're the main ones that tillage farmers are aware of and I suppose having to comply with at the moment. I suppose the other one that I forgot there is in terms of the stubble cultivation, in that you have to have ground or stubble cultivated within 14 days of harvest or as soon as after the straw is removed. So that's, I suppose, the first one I should have said at the beginning.
Look, it's certainly going to be busy, especially with the close window between the winter and spring crops. Just Shay, to go back on the layback one, that 30% can be made up of stubbles as well. A couple of
It
years ago,
can
there
be
was
stubbles as well. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
it can
right.
be. And I suppose that it's the one that personally I have a little bit of an issue with, but in terms of, quite often I've seen them out there over the last number of years where it's a gateway. So people have a gateway from one field into the next, and that gateway tends to get poached in some cases quite badly. So it's something that, ideally, and I know where the department were going on this, that you would have each individual field would have a layback on them. So you'd have, within the field itself, you'd have 30% layback on it. But in reality, what tends to happen, it's a neighbouring field adjacent, and quite often it's a grass field. And in those cases there where they're going in and out of gates or gaps or whatever it happens to be, you tend to get quite a bit of poaching on it. So it's something that, probably not ideal, but still is part of the regulations.
Probably something else, Shay, we need to be a little bit conscious of. There are producers out there that are doing this on an annual basis. How important is the rotation in that mix? I'm thinking of problems here like club root and that developing.
Yeah, for sure, Kieran. Where you go with the brassica mixes there, I suppose it is something that we're starting to see a little bit more of, or certainly where there's, say, like the oilseed rape on rotation. Probably 3 or 4 years ago, we would have said, not a huge problem, but certainly over the last 3, 4, 5 years, we're starting to see quite a few problems now being reported with club root where we would never have seen club root before. And that's really an issue with, continually growing, say, likes of fodder rape, fodder kale, stubble turnip, those type of, even red start. So those sort of things, growing them year in, year out, they certainly can facilitate the development of club root in the field. And where you're growing oilseed rape in rotation, that further complicates it altogether. So if you're say, for example, a tillage farm who is growing oilseed rape, we wouldn't recommend that you use fodder rape or stubble turnip or any of those brassica crops at all, because they just increase the risk altogether that you're going to get club root. Now there are radishes out there which can help to reduce the situation, but at the same time, you don't want to get club root in the first place. So I suppose in that case, and I've seen, I suppose, cases where people don't have oilseed rape in rotation, but they have been growing, say, stubble turnip or fodder rape for, say, 6, 7, 8, even 9, 10 years as part of gloss schemes, acre schemes, those sort of schemes, and they are starting to see issues now with club root. Albeit if you're on high pH soils or well lime soils, it tends to be slower developing. But at the same time, I certainly know of a couple of cases where in this area around Carlow, where people have brought clubroot into the farm specifically from cover crops. So I suppose that's something to be very, very aware of. On the other side of it, I suppose if you're looking at the likes of oats, if you're continually growing oats in rotation, you can bring in oat mosaic virus, which can stop you growing oats probably for your lifetime. And also, I suppose you just need to be careful if you're growing, say, the likes of legumes, peas, beans, things like that, that you're not putting those in the cover crops as well, because they can bring on diseases as well. So I suppose it's a case of knowing what your general rotation on the farm is, and not introducing the similar type cover crops into the farm during over a period of time, I suppose, as well. So
It all takes a bit of planning, and look, certainly it's coming a real busy time of the year as well.
yeah, exactly that. And I suppose the one thing I would say this year is that there seems to be a huge increase in the number of people who are growing cover crops this year, probably on the back of the water EIP. So if people are going out there or have it in their head to go cover crops this year, they really need to talk to their merchant, make out their plan, then talk to their merchant and get the seeds as quickly as they possibly can. Because what I'm hearing at the moment on the ground is that a lot of the seed has already gone out from the seed producers. They're on merchants' yards at the moment, and they're being delivered out to farms as we speak. So I suppose if you're waiting till the 1st of September or late August to go and get seed, you might be sorely disappointed, or you might be left with very restricted choice of what you can actually put out.
Shay, that was a really useful update today. Really great having you on. Thanks a million.
No problem, Kieran.
We'll leave it there for this week's episode. I'd like to thank Shay again for coming on. It's certainly a timely update at the moment. That's it for me. For updates on the sheep programme, keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Kieran Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us for more episodes.